So today I am talking to Catherine Morgan, who is mother of Sarah Robinson, who was diagnosed just before her 40th birthday, I think. And Kath and Sarah came along to the UK meetup in Twycross recently, and I thought it'd be wonderful to have Kath tell the diagnosis story again for the rest of the community to hear. So, Kath, how did Sarah come to be diagnosed at such a
Yeah, well, it's been a long journey, a long and lonely journey, to be honest. So having found the diagnosis and going to the meeting at Twycross, both for Sarah and I, we felt like we were finally somewhere where we belonged, where people understood and where we could understand where they were coming from as well. So Sarah's my only child, and she was born at 37 weeks on the 1st of May 1981. I'd been admitted to hospital with preeclampsia, but she came of her own accord. I didn't have to be induced or anything. And she was a good weight for 37 weeks. She weighed 8 pounds. But when she was born, she was born face up. And she was so hairy. She had this massive shock of black hair on her head, right down her back, on her arms and on her legs. She looked like a little baby chimp. She was beautiful, I have to say. Anyway, Sarah failed to thrive right from the start. I couldn't breastfeed her because she didn't have any sucking motion. And then when trying to bottle feed her was an absolute nightmare as well. So back in 1981, when you had a baby, you were in hospital for 2 weeks, not like now where lucky if you're in for 2 hours. So we were in for 2 weeks, and Sarah was very jaundiced and was put under a heat lamp for most of that time. But then we got sent home with the only support that we had was the health visitor. Now, I didn't have any experience of babies, so I didn't know what was right and what wasn't right. And I knew that I had a baby who was very difficult to feed. It would take me 2 hours to get 2 ounces of milk down her, and then we were nearly ready for starting again. She slept an awful lot. So I thought I was quite blessed there that she slept a lot. You know, all these other parents had babies who were screaming all the time. She wasn't like that. Anyway, she went for I took her for a 6-week assessment. And at that time, both our GPs were on annual leave. So there was a locum doctor who was going to do the assessment. It was a lady doctor. The clinic was running very late. So it was like well over an hour before we got in for our appointment. And this doctor, she was really quite agitated herself at that point, because the first thing she said to me was, I should be picking my children up. I thought, well, that's not my fault. I was here on time. Anyway, she examined Sarah. Sarah was very floppy. She didn't do any of the things that would have been expected of a 6-week-old baby. She couldn't lift her head up. They do the walking motion thing with them, but she didn't do any of that. So the doctor turned to me at that point, and 40 years on, these words are still seared into my head. She said, do you have any concerns about this baby? So I looked at her, I said, I don't know, why should I? So she said, well, I'll tell you about this baby. She doesn't eat, she doesn't drink enough, she sleeps too much, she's got no muscle tone, and her brain isn't developing. At which point I burst into tears. And she said, oh, I don't know what you're crying for. Anyway, the health visitor was on hand, because I was in a terrible state by then. So she said, I'll take you home. So by the time we got home, it was 5:30 turned. Sarah's dad was out looking for us. So when I told him what had happened, he went mad. And I'm just so glad he couldn't have spoken to that doctor at that point. Anyway, we made an appointment to see our own GP when he came back off holiday. And he was lovely, but he was very old school. And we told him what had been said. And he just said, Nonsense, absolute nonsense. She's just a little bit delayed. She'll be fine. Give her carnation milk. That's what I used to give my boys. And the health visitor was behind him going. So, yeah, I didn't give her carnation milk, and she continued to be very hard to feed. So that was that really at that point. Plus, Sarah's dad and I became extremely defensive at that point. So she continued to be slow to meet all the milestones. She never crawled, walked at 18 months, and toilet training was very difficult. To potty training was just practically impossible. And when she went to school at 5, she was still only just able to go to the toilet on her own. So primary school wasn't too bad. She was just a little bit different. And then when she got into the juniors, I know everybody talks about year 5, 6, 7, etc., but it wasn't like that then, so I find it hard to relate to that. So she was in junior 2, I think. She had a lovely teacher called Maggie, who came to me one day, and Maggie was very diplomatic. And she came to me one day and said, I'm really concerned about Sarah. If I give the class a scenario, Sarah will come at it from a totally different way than anybody else does. So I wondered if you would consent to her having a medical with the junior 4s. So I said, right, okay. But I will be there. She said, oh yeah, absolutely. So went along to the medical. I was sitting outside waiting to go in, and it suddenly popped into my head. I mean, she was 8 years old by then. I wonder if it's going to be that same doctor from when she was a baby. And then I walked in, and it was. There she was. I immediately recognised her, and she recognised me, because we'd put a formal complaint in about her attitude all those years ago. So she said, oh, hello, do you remember me? I said, yes, I do. Do you remember me? She said, yes, I do. So she went through everything with Sarah, all the tests. And then at the end, she said to me, I was concerned about Sarah when she was a baby, and I'm still concerned about her now. So I said, well, why are you concerned? She said, I think she may have some kind of a syndrome. I said, what sort of a syndrome? Obviously, she wouldn't be drawn on that. She said, but I'd like to refer her to a paediatrician. So, yeah, okay, because we knew ourselves. We knew that she was different to other children. So off we went to see the paediatrician, and they did tests, genetic tests, but of course, nothing came back because the gene hadn't been found then. And they tested her for spina bifida, all sorts of different things, and it all came back negative. So that was that. And nothing came from that. Now, as far as school was concerned, we'd gone through the statementing process twice and been denied twice. She'd been given some occupational therapy, and that was about all. I mean, we sourced tutors. We just paid for everything ourselves that we could, and none of it made a great deal of difference because the tutors didn't understand her either. So then she went to high school, and high school was a nightmare from start to finish. The bullying started then. She didn't really, she'd never made friends anyway, but this was even more difficult. So I talked to them about GCSEs, and because I foolishly believed a friend of mine who was a school teacher, and he said to me that the educational system was a meritocracy, and the more somebody puts in, the more they would get out. So don't worry about Sarah, she'll be fine in the end. Well, of course she wasn't. And but I sort of clung on to that. And I went into school to see if we could get some support for her GCSEs. And we'll sort that out. So a few weeks before they started, I went in again. oh, no, we haven't done anything, but it wouldn't make any difference in Sarah's case anyway, was all I was told. So she did her GCSEs, and when the results came out, Sarah was away with some girls from the church that we attended in Romania, visiting the orphanages. These other girls were great girls, but they were all A-star pupils. And so the results came out, and I went to collect them for Sarah. And when I opened the envelope, well, she just hadn't passed anything. She'd passed one thing, which was a textile. It wasn't a GCSE, it was something else. And she'd had no support, so I guess it wasn't a surprise, but it really hit me like a ton of bricks. And I just took to my bed for nearly a week. I just couldn't cope with it at all. You know, it just seemed so unfair, and she put so much in and got nothing out, and nobody cared. Anyway, that was that. And when she rang up that night, because all the girls were ringing up the parents for the results, and I had to try and find something positive to tell her. But she did tell me later that the girls were just lovely. They all rallied round her and really supported her. So I guess that was something. Anyway, she then went off to college, and she went to a Catholic college in our town. We weren't Catholics, but I knew it had a good supportive ethos to it. So she went to this college, Holy Cross College, and she achieved more in 2 years than she'd achieved in everything in her previous education. They were just fabulous. She did a GNVQ in health and social care, and she passed it, and she was awarded the prize for the student who put the most effort in. So we were so proud and so thrilled for her that she'd got this. Unfortunately, we couldn't go to the prize giving because she had a really bad dose of tonsillitis and was really poorly, so she missed out on that. But hey, so there we go. That was schooling. So then we came to work, and what could she do work-wise? So the first job that she had when she left college was in a care home, working in the laundry. And after 2 weeks, the manager rang me and said, "I'm really sorry to ring you, but we're going to have to finish Sarah for her own good." Why? What's she done? She said she can't manage the iron or anything else. She's burning herself, and we're really concerned that she's going to hurt herself if she carries on. So, all right, okay, fair enough. So then I knew somebody who ran a nursery, and I asked them if she could go there, because Sarah's got such a caring nature. She loves old people and she loves children. So off she went to the nursery, and after a few weeks, the manager rang me up and she said, "Sarah's late for work every day." So I said, "Well, why is she late for work?" Because I'd done the bus route with her and everything beforehand. And she said, "I don't know, but she is." So I went on the bus route with her and said, "Show me how you get to work." And what happened was, when it got to the near to the place, I think one bus stop away from where the nursery was, the bus stopped at a terminus, and it waited there for however long before it set off again. And instead, Sarah didn't understand that she could have got off and walked to the next stop. She was sitting there and waiting. So that's why she was late for work every day. So we solved that problem. And then again, I got another phone call saying, "We're going to have to finish Sarah for the safety of herself and for the safety of the children." So I said, "Why?" "Well, if they go out trying to cross the road with a load of infants is really..." And I thought, God, she can't even get herself across the road, never mind. So that finished. So then she got a job in a care home near where we lived. And at first, she was there for 2 or 3 years, and at first they really looked after her. They really took her under the wing, and they made a big... she was their poster girl for, "We employ people with learning disabilities," and she took her to conferences, and she was, she was on the front of the magazine that they issued and everything. That was great. It wasn't always easy for her with some of the other staff who didn't understand her and could be quite mean with her, but the manager was really supportive. And then she left, and a new manager came in, and within 2 weeks, Sarah had 3 disciplinaries against her. And the one that upset us the most was she was accused of elder abuse. And what the circumstances of that were that it was tea time, and one of the ladies wanted to go to the toilet before tea, and she told Sarah. So Sarah went and told the senior member and said, Gladys wants to go to the toilet, who said, well, she'll have to wait. So Gladys ended up having an accident and everything. And when this was all came out, the senior denied having said that. One thing about Sarah was she doesn't tell lies over things like that. So that was, or they threatened her with, I can't remember what body it was that they were going to report it to this particular body, and she'd be blacklisted, and it was just horrendous. So me and her dad, we went to a employment solicitor, to see about a tribunal, which cost us £800 just for the consultation. That was way back 20 years ago now. Anyway, it just so happened that a good friend of mine was an HR director, and she said, I'll take it on for you. I've not lost a case yet. Usually she was on the other side, the side that was doing the trying to prove that somebody wasn't up to scratch. So she did, but they made it so hard. They wouldn't let us see any statements from anybody. It was just really awful, and Sarah was getting more and more stressed with it all. And in the end, she said, "Mum, I can't carry on with this." So we just had to let that drop. I mean, I wrote to the chief executive of the organisation, never even got an acknowledgement of my letter. So it was just all horrid. So that was, must be just about 20 years ago now, and Sarah hasn't worked since, because in retrospect, those were not the right jobs for her anyway. And we didn't really, understand, because at that point, the only diagnosis that she had was dyspraxia, which when she was diagnosed with it, it wasn't called dyspraxia, it was called clumsy child syndrome. So that's a lovely label to have, isn't it? Anyway, after her dad died, sort of moving on, I thought, like I said, if I walk under the proverbial bus, what's going to happen to her? So I work in mental health, and I was talking to a psychologist colleague, and I said to him, I was telling him about Sarah, and he said his partner was a specialist in autism. He said, I'll give you some tools to do with Sarah, and let me have them back and we'll have a look at them. So Sarah and I did these tools, took them back, and he said, Sarah needs a full assessment. There's no doubt about that. So this would be about 2014, I think. So go to your GP and tell him that you want her to go to Sheffield Adult Autism Centre, because that's the centre of excellence for adults with autism. So off we went to the GP, whose first response was, no. What was it? It wasn't, I can't remember, the PCT. The PCT won't pay for that. So I just went crazy at that point and said, do you know what? This girl has been let down all her life by the medical system, by the educational system, and I'm telling you, she's having this. And off I went. And 2 weeks later, we had an appointment to go. So they sent us all the forms and everything to fill in, which were very similar to the ones we'd already done. Off we went to Sheffield and saw a lovely psychologist who said, right, Sarah, today I'm just going to talk to you. There's no tests, nothing at all, because you and your mum have already filled in everything. I'm coming from the point that you don't have autism, and we'll see how we go. So 3 hours later, he said, I've got absolutely no doubt that Sarah is autistic. And that in itself was a big relief. So that was good. And then, like I said, she moved out from home about 18 months after her dad died. She wanted to live independently. She had a friend who had a room in a shared house, and there was a spare room, and it wasn't too far from my house. So I thought, do you know what? She's going to have to do it at some time. I'm not going to be here forever, so I could try and help her to get independent now. So she went and moved into the house. Too many things happened in that house for me to even begin to go on. But eventually, she managed to get a little council flat. And again, that was just a nightmare for 2 years, because the girl opposite was a young girl straight out from care, who had all sorts of people going to her flat. It was just awful. And Sarah has a very strong sense of what's right and what's wrong. And there's no black, and as I'm sure everybody understands, no grey areas, everything's black and white. So Sarah would ring the police, and the police would come, and then this girl would know that Sarah had rung the police, and she was very vulnerable, and they were knocking on the door. Have you got some coffee? Could you give us this? Have you got any money we could borrow? And Sarah would just give it all to them. So it all came to a head one night when Sarah rang me in the early hours. It was always in the early hours. Absolutely hysterical. And Mum, the police have kicked the door down, because it was a shared hallway. And I don't know what's going on, and I'm really frightened. So obviously I went straight round, and sure enough, there were 2 policemen there. And one of them said to me, "Who are you?" I said, "I'll tell you who I am. I'm the mother of the girl in this flat opposite who's got learning difficulties, who's absolutely terrified, and nobody has had the courtesy to knock on and tell her what's going on." I said, "She's frightened to death." So anyway, but the good thing from that was that 2 PCSOs, the local PCSOs got involved and started to come round to visit Sarah. And they were lovely, and they said, "This isn't the right place for Sarah." I said, "I know it's not the right place." So they said, "We'll support you in trying to get her moved." So nothing was happening. So I made an appointment to go and see their director of housing, and I told him the whole story and all about Sarah. And he said, "Listen," at the end, he said, "Well, you know, it's been very nice listening to you, but there's a waiting list and there's not a lot I can do." So I just said, "Well, okay, but on your head be it, if anything happens to my daughter, you know what the circumstances are now." And then a week later, she got offered another flat. So he obviously did take note of what I said. And she moved to the other flat, which is in a much nicer area. And she's been in that, well, her and her husband had now moved to a ground floor flat, but it was a first floor flat in a lovely area, and she was much happier there. So many things happened. Like I said, I haven't got time to go into it all. Sorry, Annabelle.
What actually led then to the WSS diagnosis?
Okay, so about 2.5 years ago now, my stepdaughter, who is a primary school head, rang me and said, "Have you heard of something called Rubinstein-Taby syndrome?" So I said, "No, I haven't." She said, "Well, I've been researching it for one of the children at school," and she said, "Sarah seems to tick so many boxes." So I said, "All right, okay." So I did have a look, and I thought, yeah, she does tick an awful lot of these boxes. So I wrote to the genetics department at Manchester University and told them all about Sarah and said, "Would you be prepared to see her? I know that it seems to be mainly children that you deal with." And they were brilliant. They wrote back and said, "Absolutely, just get a referral from your GP." So that's what we did. And then it didn't happen for quite a while, because Sarah was reluctant to. There were other things going on in her life, and you know, WSS children can only deal with so much. So we eventually last year, well, 2020, I think it was about February. No, it must have been pre-COVID, so it must have been 2019. We eventually got an appointment to go and see the genetic consultant, and I said about the Rubinstein-Taby. So he did a very thorough examination, took a history and everything else, and he said, "You're right, she does tick quite a lot of the boxes." He said, "But I think it could be something else," and I think he was probably thinking about WSS at the time. Well, so it took nearly a year for the test results to come back. So in April of this year, we had a video conference with him, and he said, "Sarah does have a genetic condition. She doesn't have Rubinstein-Taby. She's got something called Wiedemann-Steiner syndrome." So yeah, so that's how we found out.
And what did you then do, having found out the diagnosis? What did you do to find out more about it?
Well, the consultant told me, he said there is an international group. He said, and I'm pretty sure there's a British group as well, but I'm not quite sure how you would find out about that. So obviously, I found out myself. I researched and found the British WSS group and the international one, and joined both of them. And then we found out about the family day down at Twycross. So we decided we'd like to go there, and that was just wonderful. It was a revelation. I was looking at all these children, seeing Sarah at various stages in their life, and it was really very moving.
There are a lot of similarities, aren't there?
Absolutely. Certainly the physical ones. I couldn't get over it. I keep saying to people, Down's children all look similar. I said, well, WSS children are the same. They've all got very similar facial features. Sarah's got the hands, curvy little fingers, the feet, still very hairy, just everything really.
We know from what you've said and from what we've seen as Sarah that she's married. Her husband Lee, clearly very supportive, and she's doing some fundraising, making key rings, I think.
She is, yeah.
To raise money for the charity. Well, that's fantastic.